All right, so you wanted a deep dive on cannabinoid research gaps.
Right.
Specifically, what's next for these things as medicine, beyond just using CBD for pain?
Right.
We've got a lot to unpack, but I think you'll be surprised how much we still don't know about cannabinoids.
Yeah, it's a really promising area, and we need to remember that the endocannabinoid system does so much more than just pain and inflammation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're talking blood pressure, bone density, even cancer cell growth, and how our digestion works.
It's like this whole hidden network controlling our bodies, and we're just
Yeah.
starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
So where are the real challenges in turning these discoveries into, actual treatments?
Well, one of the biggest ones is specificity.
Specificity.
You see those main cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2, they're everywhere in the body.
Right.
So trying to design a therapy that hits just one specific organ or tissue, that's really hard.
I see.
Because you don't want to, say, target inflammation in the gut, but then accidentally activate CB1 receptors in the brain. You don't want to create psychoactive side effects. So researchers are working on ways to get those cannabinoids delivered straight to the gut,
So it only affects the area it's supposed to?
Exactly.
That makes sense. Otherwise, it's like, what, trying to fix a watch with a hammer?
Exactly. You might solve one problem, but you'll probably create a bunch more in the process.
Right. Okay, so specificity is a big one. What else?
Another big challenge is the lack of standardized testing for these products.
Hmm.
Right now, you just don't know what you're getting. The levels of cannabinoids and terpenes can be all over the place depending on the strain, the product.
Oh.
It makes it almost impossible to compare research findings or predict what's going to happen when someone uses a specific product.
So it's not enough to know if something's got THC or CBD in it, right?
Right.
You need to know exactly how much and what else is in there that might change how it works.
Precisely. It's like trying to follow a recipe, but the ingredient amounts are all random. You might get something edible, but you're probably not going to get what you expected.
Yeah, definitely not.
We need standardization, not just for personalized medicine, but for research as a whole. It's the only way to move beyond, just anecdotes and toward medicine that's based on evidence.
Okay, so we've got specificity, we've got standardization, and something I've always wondered about is why aren't there more big official studies for cannabis?
Yeah.
Clinical trials.
Yeah.
It seems like we have all these stories about how it helps people, but not a lot of hard science to back it up.
You're right. And that's a huge area where we need more research.
Okay.
Imagine trying to study, I don't know, music, but without knowing what instruments we're playing or the structure of the piece.
Right.
It would be chaos. We need to bring that same level of scientific rigor to cannabis research, the same as any other medication. We need standardized protocols, well-designed studies.
So we can go beyond this work for my aunt and really understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned this receptor earlier, GPR55.
Yes.
I haven't heard much about that one. What's the deal with it?
So unlike CB1 and CB2, it's structurally different. It's kind of off on its own. And what's really fascinating is that it's involved in all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
Blood pressure, bone density, maybe even cancer cell growth.
Wow, that's a lot. So what are the big questions researchers are trying to answer about GPR55?
Well, one of the big ones is it helpful or harmful? It seems to depend on the situation. For instance, some studies show that if you activate GPR55, it might actually make certain cancers grow faster. But if you block it, it seems to slow them down.
Oh, wow.
So researchers are trying to figure out, okay, what's its real role in cancer? Can we target it to develop new treatments?
But we don't even know if it's our friend or enemy yet.
Exactly.
And it just shows that the endocannabinoid system, it's not just a simple on-off switch.
No.
It's all these complicated interactions and feedback loops.
It is.
It's not just about finding the right cannabinoid. It's about understanding how it fits into this whole complex system.
Right. And that leads us to personalized medicine, which is a really exciting area.
Personalized medicine.
Imagine a world where we can tailor treatments to each person based on their own endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
We could look at their endocannabinoid tone, their genes, even their gut microbiome.
Right.
And then create a blend of cannabinoids and terpenes that's perfect for them.
That sounds amazing.
Right.
Like the ultimate goal.
It is.
So what's standing in the way of making that happen?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is finding reliable ways to measure what's going on in someone's endocannabinoid system. We need to be able to accurately assess their endocannabinoid tone and then be able to predict how they're going to respond to different cannabinoid therapies.
Right. So it's not just about checking the levels of a few cannabinoids.
Right.
You've got to figure out how their genes, their lifestyle, everything is affecting their endocannabinoid system.
Exactly. And then there's the whole question of how different cannabinoids work together and how they interact with other signaling pathways in the body. And that's where things like allosteric modulators come in.
Allosteric modulators? I don't think we've talked about those yet.
So instead of directly activating a receptor, an allosteric modulator, it binds to a different spot on the receptor.
Okay.
And that changes the receptor's shape a little bit, which changes how it responds to cannabinoids.
So you're not turning it on or off, you're sort of fine-tuning it.
Exactly. It's like adjusting the sensitivity of a dimmer switch.
Right. I get it.
And this could be really useful for getting more targeted effects and minimizing side effects, because you can enhance or diminish the effects of cannabinoids.
So it gives you more control.
Exactly. A lot more control.
Wow, this is getting really complex.
It is.
But it sounds like it could be really powerful.
It could be.
So are we basically saying that we need to look beyond just finding the right cannabinoid
We do.
and look at how to control its effects more precisely?
We need to understand those interactions between cannabinoids and other systems in the body,
Okay.
especially other neurotransmitter systems like dopamine, serotonin, adenosine.
Right, all those chemical messengers in the brain.
Right, because there's more and more evidence that cannabinoids can actually change how those systems work.
So give me an example. How does that actually play out?
Well, one example is the interaction between cannabinoids and the adenosine system.
Okay.
Adenosine, it helps regulate sleep, arousal, pain, inflammation.
Okay.
And some research suggests that cannabinoids might actually boost adenosine activity.
So they're working together.
Exactly. And since both cannabinoids and adenosine have anti-inflammatory properties, using them together could amplify those effects.
Interesting. So they're like teammates.
Exactly.
And this interaction with adenosine, that could explain why cannabis sometimes makes people sleepy or helps with anxiety.
It could.
Now, what about dopamine and serotonin? Do cannabinoids mess with those too?
Yeah, there's research suggesting they might.
Okay.
Some studies have found that THC, the psychoactive part of cannabis, it might actually increase dopamine release in certain parts of the brain.
Which is probably why it can make people feel euphoric.
It's possible.
Because dopamine's all about reward and pleasure.
Right. But we need more research to know for sure how that works.
Okay.
And then there's serotonin. There's some interesting research suggesting that CBD, the non-psychoactive part, might actually interact with serotonin receptors.
So CBD could be doing more than just fighting inflammation.
It might be.
It might be affecting mood, too.
Exactly. And this just highlights how important it is to keep researching these interactions between cannabinoids and other neurotransmitter systems. Because the more we understand how they work together, the more therapeutic possibilities we might uncover.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, and
Yeah.
every layer reveals more complexity, but also more potential.
Exactly.
This has been incredibly helpful so far. We've gone from endocannabinoid basics to really complex signaling pathways and how these compounds could potentially treat so many things.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, though, I want to circle back to personalized medicine.
Yeah.
That idea of creating custom treatments for each person's needs.
It's really fascinating.
It sounds like the future. Being able to analyze someone's endocannabinoid tone, their genes, their microbiome, and create a blend just for them.
It does. It's like moving from off-the-rack clothing to having a tailor make something just for you.
So what's holding us back from getting there?
Well, one big obstacle, as we said before, is standardized testing.
Right.
We need to make sure every cannabis product is tested the same way so we know exactly what's in it.
Because right now, it's all over the place.
It is, and that makes it really hard to develop precise and consistent therapies.
So we need to be able to measure those cannabinoids, terpenes, everything really accurately.
We do.
Otherwise, we're just guessing.
We are. And standardization isn't just important for personalized medicine, it's crucial for all research. It's like trying to study music without knowing what instruments are being played or how the music is composed.
Right. It's chaos.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big need: more rigorous clinical trials. We need to really understand what different cannabis formulations can do, not just rely on what people tell us.
So basically, we need to apply the same level of scientific rigor to cannabis research as we do for any other medication.
We do. It's the only way to build a strong foundation for this field and to gain acceptance from the medical community.
To make it real medicine.
Exactly, to move from anecdotes to evidence-based medicine.
Okay, so to recap this part of our deep dive, more research, more standardized testing, more precise targeting.
Yeah.
But the potential here is huge.
It is.
Personalized medicine, allosteric modulators, exploring all these interactions with other neurotransmitter systems is a really exciting time to be following this field.
It is. There's still so much we don't know, but the future of cannabinoid research is just filled with possibilities. And it's crazy to think we're just barely starting to understand what this system can do for us, you know? But anyway, let's move on to an area of research that's been getting a lot of attention lately. These things called 1-deoxycannabinoids.
1-deoxycannabinoids.
Yeah.
That's a new one for me. What's so special about them?
Well, they're like THC, but synthetic. So they're chemically similar, but tweaked a little bit.
Okay.
And these tweaks make them really good at targeting the CB2 receptor specifically.
Oh, right. And CB2 receptors, those are mostly on immune cells, right?
Yeah.
Not like CB1, which is all over the brain.
Yeah.
So if you can target CB2, you could get the benefits without, the psychoactive effects of THC.
Exactly. And that's why they're so interesting. They could be a way to get the therapeutic effects of cannabinoids, especially for things like inflammation and immune system stuff, but without the high.
So you're basically separating the medicine from the high, right? What kind of benefits are we talking about specifically? Like, what could these 1-deoxycannabinoids actually be used to treat?
Researchers are looking at them for all kinds of things, actually. Inflammatory conditions like arthritis, autoimmune diseases like MS, even neurodegenerative stuff like Alzheimer's.
Wow, that's a lot. Can you give me some examples of how they're actually being studied?
Sure. One that's looking promising is called JWH133.
JWH133.
Yeah. Studies have shown it really likes to bind to that CB2 receptor, and it can reduce inflammation in animals with MS and rheumatoid arthritis.
So it's like a targeted attack on inflammation, going straight for those immune cells without messing with the brain.
Exactly. And because it's not activating CB1 receptors, it's less likely to cause any psychoactive effects.
Makes sense. Are there other 1-deoxycannabinoids that are showing promise too?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them being studied. Another one is called AM1241.
Okay.
It's shown to be really good at relieving pain in animals. So it could be a new option for chronic pain instead of relying on opioids, which have all those side effects.
Right. So we could have a whole new class of painkillers that work through the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, that's the hope. And what's really cool is that they work by helping the body's own healing mechanisms.
It's like giving your body's natural defenses a boost.
Exactly.
But even with these targeted therapies, I imagine people still respond differently, right? Like with any medication. How do you make sure these treatments work for everyone?
Well, that's where personalized medicine comes in again. Everyone's endocannabinoid system is different.
Right.
Their genes, their lifestyle, their gut bacteria, all of that can affect how they respond to cannabinoids.
Right. We were talking before about analyzing someone's endocannabinoid tone, looking at their genes, even their microbiome, and then creating a personalized blend of cannabinoids and other stuff just for them.
Yeah, and combining that approach with these more targeted therapies like the 1-deoxycannabinoids, that could be incredibly powerful. You could get the maximum benefit with the least amount of side effects.
It sounds like the future, being able to tailor treatments like that.
It does, doesn't it?
But is it actually realistic? Is personalized cannabinoid medicine really something we could see in the near future?
I think it's closer than we might think. With all the advances in genetic testing, microbiome analysis, and our understanding of the endocannabinoid system, we're getting there fast. It's a really exciting time.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
But even with all these advances, you still have the problem of actually turning these discoveries into real treatments, right?
You do.
Research is one thing, but getting a new drug approved and available to patients, that's a whole different story.
Exactly. It's a long and complicated process. And with cannabis, it's even harder because of the legal issues in many places and the stigma that still surrounds it.
Yeah, we're still dealing with outdated ideas and legal roadblocks that can really slow things down.
We are, but I'm hopeful that as the research gets stronger and shows just how effective these treatments can be, those barriers will start to come down.
Yeah, I think you're right. The more we learn about the endocannabinoid system and its role in health, the harder it'll be to ignore the potential of cannabinoid therapies.
Exactly. The science is getting too strong to ignore. And we're already seeing progress in a lot of places, with more countries legalizing medical cannabis and investing in research.
It feels like things are finally starting to change.
They are.
So we've talked about a lot today: the challenges of specificity and standardized testing, the possibilities of personalized medicine, these exciting 1-deoxycannabinoids. It's been a really fascinating look at the latest in cannabinoid research.
It has, and it's important to remember that we're really just getting started.
Right.
There's still so much more to learn about this incredible system.
This deep dive has definitely made me want to learn more. I'm really curious to see what breakthroughs happen next.
I am too. I think the future of cannabinoid research is incredibly bright. We could be on the edge of a whole new era in medicine, where these therapies play a major role in improving people's lives.
Well, I'm convinced. This isn't just a fad. These cannabinoid therapies are the real deal.
I agree. And as we keep exploring the endocannabinoid system, we're going to find even more amazing things, even more ways to use it to help people.
Before we move on, though, I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The complexity of this whole endocannabinoid system.
Okay.
It's one thing to understand it in theory, but how do scientists actually measure and study these pathways in the lab?
That's a really good question. And it's true, studying the endocannabinoid system comes with its own set of challenges.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest is that endocannabinoids themselves are super fragile.
Ooh.
They break down really easily, which makes it hard to study them in living things.
So it's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
It is. But scientists have come up with some pretty clever ways to do it. They can use things like mass spectrometry, which is a super precise way to measure tiny amounts of stuff. So even though endocannabinoids are fleeting, they can still measure them in tissues and fluids.
Okay, so we can track them down. But how do researchers actually change the endocannabinoid system in their experiments, to figure out how it works?
Well, there are a couple of ways. One common one is to use drugs that either activate or block cannabinoid receptors.
Right.
So they might use synthetic cannabinoids like THC to turn on those CB1 receptors, or they might use a drug like rimonabant, which blocks CB1.
So it's like they have tools to turn the volume up or down on different parts of the system.
That's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And by watching what happens when they do that, they can learn a lot about the endocannabinoid system's role in all sorts of bodily processes.
It's like they're conducting an experiment on an orchestra, silencing some instruments, amplifying others, and seeing how it changes the overall sound.
Exactly. And on top of these drugs, they're also using genetic techniques. Like, they can create mice that are missing certain cannabinoid receptors altogether.
Oh, wow.
Which lets them study what happens when those receptors are gone.
So it's like taking an instrument completely out of the orchestra.
Exactly. And these knockout mice have been incredibly helpful in understanding how the endocannabinoid system works, in everything from how we feel pain to how hungry we get.
It's amazing what scientists can do these days.
It is.
But with all these different tools and approaches, how do they decide which one to use?
It really depends on what they're trying to figure out. If they want to understand how one specific receptor works, they might use a knockout mouse or a drug that targets that receptor.
Okay.
But if they want to study how endocannabinoid signaling changes over time, they might use mass spectrometry to track those levels.
So they have this whole toolkit, and they pick the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes cannabinoid research so exciting. There's always a new tool to try, a new question to answer, a new mystery to solve.
It's really inspiring to see all this work being done.
It is.
But I do wonder, with a system this complex and connected to so many things, is there a risk of messing things up when you start manipulating it?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about how it's involved in so many different things in the body. Is there a chance that if you tweak one part of it, you could accidentally cause problems somewhere else?
It's definitely something researchers have to be really careful about. The endocannabinoid system is all about balance. And if you mess with that balance, you could end up with unintended consequences.
Right.
It's like tuning a really complex instrument. You have to be so careful not to over-tighten or loosen the strings, or the whole thing could go out of tune.
I like that analogy. So how do researchers make sure that these cannabinoid treatments are safe and effective?
Well, it all comes down to doing really thorough research.
Yeah. That means preclinical studies, testing in animals, and then carefully controlled clinical trials in humans.
Right.
And these studies help us figure out what the benefits might be, but also what the risks could be.
So you start in the lab, then you move to more complex models, and then finally you test it in people.
Exactly. And it's not just about the science itself, it's also about working together. Scientists, doctors, and regulatory agencies all have to collaborate to make sure that these therapies are developed responsibly and used the right way.
It sounds like it takes a whole team to get this right.
It does, and it's really inspiring to see all these talented people from different fields working together to move this research forward.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. We've learned about how complex the endocannabinoid system is, the challenges and the potential of cannabinoid research, and all the exciting possibilities for the future. It really feels like we're entering a whole new era of medicine where cannabinoid therapies could play a huge role in improving people's health.
I agree. We're just at the beginning of this journey of discovery, and it's a journey that's full of amazing potential.
And to our listener, we want to encourage you to keep learning and exploring.
Yeah.
The world of cannabinoid science is always changing, and there's always something new to discover. Maybe you'll even be inspired to contribute to this field yourself and help shape the future of medicine.
That would be awesome.
It would.
And
Till next time, keep those questions coming.
keep diving deep.